Hey guys, tonight we take a journey into something far darker than shiny armor and chivalric vows. Welcome to the brutal reality of being a knight in the Crusades. Before you settle in, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you're into deep dives on medieval mayhem, subscribe for more history unfiltered, and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always wild to see this global squad assemble. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on that fan for some white noise ambience, and let's ease together into a world where steel soaks in sweat and faith drips in blood. Congratulations, you've just materialized in a drafty castle courtyard circa 1096. The air is a mix of adrenaline and something more acidic, the scent of unwashed men who've been drilling since dawn. You blink through steel-rimmed mail coifs, the chain links pressing into your cheeks like 1,000 tiny needles. There's no memory foam, no ventilation, and absolutely no understanding nursemaid to pat you on the back and say, "It's okay, you'll survive." Instead, it's the roosters crowing, the clank of armor from fellow knights, and the low moan of your own joints, which sound like broken floorboards every time you shift. Your breath clouds in the cold air, frosting on your mustache, because it's early autumn and still bitter in these northern hills. You're 25. Which by 11th century standards is nearly ancient. Your knees already crunch like an old barn door. But you've signed up for this. Maybe it was piety, maybe it was promise of land, maybe it was that sweet, ever-looming rumor of plunder. Either way, you're here, and it's time for your first lesson. Step 1 in night school: get dressed. Toss aside any modern notion of convenience. There's no zipper on your gambeson, no velcro on your greaves. Instead, you wrestle into layers: a linen shirt stiff with sweat from yesterday, a quilted padded jack that sticks to your arms like tar, leather leggings scuffed from last season's tournaments, and then the mail hauberk, 4 kilos of interlocking rings that slide over your torso, bending your spine into a permanent hunch. Finally, the breastplate, creaking as you shove it over your chest, the blacksmith's hammer marks still visible. Balance it all with a helmet that squeezes your skull and cuts off your peripheral vision like a pair of medieval Google glasses, except it's 10 times heavier and has 0 tech perks. You latch every buckle, brace your back, and in one breath, become both legend and lamb. Now that you're suited up like a walking fortress, it's time for breakfast. And by breakfast, imagine stale bread so hard it could break a short sword, swarming with weevils that either creep you out or provide extra protein. Your choice. You dunk it into a bowl of lukewarm pottage made from oats, beans, and whatever root vegetables survived last night's raiding party of rats. There's no espresso machine to ward off the chill, just a mug of weak ale because water is risky, streams are cesspools, wells are magnets for rot, and only a fool drinks from the latrine bucket. So you drink, you chew, you swallow, knowing that in an hour you'll be sweating more ale out of your pores than you just drank. With your stomach half filled, you join the rest of the cohort for weapons training. There's no padded arena or soft mats. We're talking rocky ground littered with horse droppings and shards of broken lances. You grip your sword, rusty at the hilt, nicked along the blade, its balance off by half a hand's width, because maintenance happens when you can fit it in between marches and pitched battles. Your gloves are cracked leather, fingerless so you can actually feel the crossguard. You swing, miss, swing again, the edge bites into the air with a hollow thud. You try a thrust, too slow, and the practice dummy, a hay bale lashed to a tree stump, barely flinches. The knight instructing you snorts and steps in, demonstrating a cut that would have split you in half if it were real, his steel whistle of a blade singing through the morning mist. You try again, sweat stinging your eyes. Your mail rubs raw spots between your shoulder blades. Each blow is taxed by the weight you lug around, 35 pounds of steel, leather, and bone-jarring expectation. Once you've earned a pause, if you can call it that, you hobble over to the stable. Your horse is a war-bred destrier, half the size of your modern expectations, stocky and broad-shouldered, built to carry both you and your armor into the fray. You mount with the grace of astonishing desperation, lifting beyond half your weight as the stirrups creak under strain. You pat its neck, smelling hay, horse sweat, and that sweet, sickly odor of feed fermenting in the barn. Then you tack up, reins rough as rope, saddle heavy enough to pull you into the animal's spine, and saddle blankets thin as laundry left out in the rain. If you're lucky, your harness doesn't pinch the horse's withers. If you're not, the screams from your mount echo across the courtyard like a disembodied prayer. With saddle breaking over, you join the cavalcade heading out. The countryside here is less picturesque than you'd imagine. Muddy roads churned by wagons, trees stripped of foliage for firewood, swathes of farmland trampled by thousands of marching feet. Every few miles there's a makeshift market, peasants selling rotten cheese, moldy grains, and goats that look skinny enough to vanish if you stare too long. You purchase a hunk of cheese because you're ravenous. It tastes like sour sweat, but beggars can't be choosers. Birds circle overhead, waiting for you to drop something edible, or for the wounded to fall so they can pick at the carcass. As you ride, conversation is limited. Faces are masked by mud, exhaustion, the haze of chaplain sermons about sins you can't even pronounce. There's talk of distant victories, rumors of dying kings, whispered prayers for holy relics, but mostly it's silence, the heavy, anxious hush before the storm. The sun climbs, the dust rises, and the weight of the world sits squarely on your shoulders, literally. You shift in the saddle, trying to avoid blisters on your inner thighs, but the saddle leather rubs until it's raw. Every breeze is thin, every bird call distant. You remember modern complaints, traffic jams, air conditioning gone out for a day, but none of that matters here. This is the real grind, hours in the saddle, veins pulsating, back screaming, knees strangled by mail and leather as the sun beats down. Eventually you reach a river crossing, and now it's time for half the fun, waterlogged armor. You and your fellows plunge into the icy current, the weight of chain mail pulling you into the depths unless you keep pumping your arms like a drowning man learning to fly. The water soaks through every layer, chilling your bones. You clamber onto the opposite bank, soaked, pale, teeth chattering. Your mail is a leaden hug, your gambeson a sponge, your spirit at risk of going under. You wring out as much water as you can, tiny droplets flying off rivets, while the horse stamps and shakes, flicking you with a soggy tail in solidarity. That night, you camp beneath the stars, or what passes for stars amid the torchlit chaos. No lightweight tents or sleeping bags here. You spread your cloak on hard ground, pray for a breeze to chase off the stench of sweat and straw, and lie awake listening to snoring horses, drunken nights, and distant howls of wolves bold enough to sniff at the campfire's edge. You dream of home, warm hearth, soft mattress, table laden with fresh bread and cheese, a proper toilet behind closed doors. But each dream twists when you recall why you came, for honor, for salvation, for loot. And as the embers fade, you wonder if any of it is worth the rotting teeth, the splintered bones, the fleas that burrow through your seams, the damp chill that seeps into your marrow. Tomorrow, you'll saddle up again and ride into a war far from romantic. You'll break bread with killers, pledge fealty to lords who'll trade you like cattle, and maybe, just maybe, glimpse the Holy Land's dunes before your own blood soaks its sands. But for tonight, you lie awake counting regrets, wondering how long it takes for steel to rust after death, and whether you'll be left lying on some foreign soil, a martyr to a cause you barely understand. And that's just how the first 48 hours of knighthood in the Crusades go. You've been trudging for days, the road stretching out ahead like an unending corridor of churned mud and shattered hopes. The sun has risen beyond mercy. Noon in Anatolia feels like standing inside a bellows, every breath a gulp of molten air. Your armor, still damp from the river crossing, is now baking you from the inside out. Each rivet is a blistering hot coal pinning you to your gambeson. Horses sway in the saddle, chests heaving, tongues lolling out as if they too are seconds from heat stroke. You grip your reins so hard your knuckles blanch, trying to will the beast forward, but its steps are labored, every hoof sinking into a mire of dust and dung. The local peasants you passed yesterday have vanished, shuddering themselves in hovels or fleeing inland to chase whatever semblance of normal life they can salvage. The wind carries whispers of rotting carcasses littering the roadside, wolves and scavenger birds feasting on the fallen. And then comes the water. Or rather, what you thought was water. You kneel at a well rimmed with cracked stones, toss your bucket in, and haul up a sloshing mess that reeks of mold and mildew. Drinking it is a dare. You gulp down half a ladle before your stomach flips like a ship in a gale. Within hours, cramps seize you, agonizing spasms that fold you in on yourself. You stagger off the path, clutching your gut, sweat pouring off your brow in rivulets. Somewhere in the march, your comrades have nicknamed it the Crusader's curse, a swirl of dysentery that claims half your cohort before they ever draw a sword. Bodies crumple behind carts laden with supplies, left unburied until carrion beetles peel flesh from bone. At night, you lie shivering under a thin cloak, the hard ground through which the cold upward seeps, praying the cramps don't wake you, because if they do, the nearest latrine is a hole in the earth swarming with flies. Privacy? What's that? You share this nightmare with dozens of other nights, men you once trusted with your life now reduced to guttural groans and ragged moans. But you made vows. You told yourself this was holy, that suffering was sacred, that every drop of sweat and every retching spasm drew you closer to God. So you wipe the sweat from your eyes, swing your legs off the cloak, and push on. Soon enough, the path climbs toward a plateau and you catch sight of the enemy's cavalry. Turkish horse archers dancing across the plains like a storm of black dots on the horizon. They pepper your formation with arrows, skirting your flanks, lancing men and horses alike with pinpoint accuracy. There's no warning whistle, no horn blast, just the sudden hiss of hundreds of shafts cutting the air. Your mail rattles as you duck behind your shield, ears ringing. The first knight beside you goes down, an arrow striking the joint of his armor and embedding in flesh. He convulses, mouth foaming, before gasping out his last breath. Panic ripples through the line. You and your brothers in arms, trained to hold the line, now scrambling for cover against an invisible hail. You hack at the air with your sword, trying to cut down the approaching riders, but each swing feels slow, unwieldy, as though you're slicing through treacle. Your throat is dry, your vision blanking at the edges from heat exhaustion. You hear a scream behind you and turn to see a giant of a knight pinned by his own horse. A wall of muscle and steel, trampled under hoof. There's nothing chivalric about it. There's no heroic last stand. It's chaos and terror, and you're one misstep away from joining the dead. If you survive the skirmish, you might expect a truce to catch your breath, but in the Crusaders' world mercy is an afterthought. By dusk the bodies have been stripped, swords and mail pried loose, and the enemy has faded back beyond the hills, leaving you to count your wounded and your dead. You kneel beside a comrade with an arrow lodged in his thigh. He's pale as parchment, fever already setting in as blood seeps through his tabard. There's no surgeon's tent, no anesthetic. All you have is a rusty knife and the chaplain's blessing. Together you yank the shaft free. The barbs tear tissue like a saw-through meat. He screams so loud the birds take flight. Then you bind the wound with a strip of linen torn from your shirt, hoping infection doesn't claim him. You whisper a quick prayer. God, spare him! But in this land God is a silent partner, more interested in test scores than saving souls. Nightfall brings no solace. You lay out your cloak again, though its charcoal smell is as bad as the ground. Rats the size of your boots scurry at the camp's edge, bold enough to tug at discarded rations. Torches sputter, throwing eerie shadows over gaunt faces. You hear a coughing fit from across the embers, one of the younger knights coughing blood. Turn your face away, he rasped earlier, half shame, half fear. You obey, you can't unsee that. Sleep comes in fits, nightmares edged with the crack of bones, the hiss of arrow flight, the cry of broken men. Every few hours you jerk awake, convinced you're still drowning in that Anatolian river, armor pulling you under. Morning breaks on the crusade outside Nicaea, a city ringed by walls said to hold the head of St. Peter himself. Rumor says this relic will secure God's favor for whoever controls it, but right now you trade the saint's skull for a loaf of bread that isn't stone. The siege begins, battering rams, ladders, siege towers, tools of starvation disguised as instruments of war. You spend your day hauling logs for the tower's frame, each one soaked and heavy, your back screaming as though your spine is splitting in two. A sudden spring rain turns the ground to soup, wood rots in your hands, ropes fray under your grip. You slip in the mud, splintering a nail in your palm. You bite back a scream, wipe the blood on your leggings, and keep hauling. No one notices one more open wound amid a sea of hurt. Food dwindles. One morning you wake to find the cooks distributing a single thin slice of bacon to each man. To keep your strength, they say, though strength seems a distant memory. That bacon tastes of ash and regret. You chew slowly, savoring the greasy bite, knowing it might be your last. Sheep graze skeptically outside the walls, peering at you like unwilling dinner guests. You think about stealing one, but you're too weary to twitch your sword. Instead, you suck on a piece of stale bread, crust so hard it scrapes against your teeth. Some knights resort to eating leather from their saddles. Others crush herbs they don't recognize into a minty paste to mask the taste of rot. Rats, once pests, are now prey. Men stalk them around the walls like furtive hunters, skinning and roasting the dirty creatures over feeble flames. The smell is acrid, not quite meat, not quite filth. As the weeks crawl by, disease circles the camp like a vulture. Dysentery never quite leaves you. It flares in the afternoon sun, stealing energy you can't spare. Fever follows, burning away your appetite and your faith. A priest moves among the men, sprinkling holy water on foreheads, murmuring Latin you barely understand. Saint Deus, ora pro nobis. But the water is just water, and the Latin is just words. Half of the battalion lies in makeshift tents, too weak to speak, bodies convulsing in agony. The groans form a chorus of torment that haunts your dreams. The chaplain carries a bucket for the dead, dousing each body with wine before sealing it in a hastily dug pit. He tells you it's a mercy, but you wonder if the wine is meant to comfort God or to wash away the stench of death. And then the walls fall. Whether by treachery or siegecraft, the gates swing open and the city floods with crusaders hungry for plunder. There's looting, but you find little worth taking: rusted pots, rotted grain, and a few stray coins. Hope drains away as quickly as the city's life. You take what you can: a scrap of cloth for bandages, a leather pouch with a handful of copper. The locals cower in cellars, eyes hollow. You snag a candle from one house, the flicker reminding you of distant hearths back home. You clutch it like treasure, then drop it when a civilian screams as a soldier drags her into the street. You avert your gaze. This is war. By the time you mount your horse again, you're a shadow of the knight who left 3 moons ago. Your armor is dented, your sword dulled. Your limbs feel like lead. You have no idea when the next meal will come or if any of the men beside you will wake tomorrow. Still, you ride on, through valleys strewn with corpses, past villages ghost silent, and toward a destination you've heard whispered like a holy promise, Jerusalem. But between here and there lies more death than life, more suffering than salvation. And as you press on, each breath is a reminder that faith alone won't carry you through. You'll need more than prayers. You'll need luck, grit, and a tolerance for misery that borders on masochism. So here you are, 40 days into a crusade that's already taken half your spirit. You've tasted blood, sweat, tears, and worse. You know now that being a knight isn't about glorious banners or epic charges. It's about enduring the unbearable, watching your brothers die, and still lacing on your boots at dawn. If you think you'd last a single hour, think again. But if you're still curious, stick around. As dawn breaks once more, the silhouette of a stone keep rises against a pale sky, its battlements crouch like hungry beasts ready to feast on your flesh. The air is unnaturally still, a fragile hush before the storm. Silence is deceptive, of course, you know this now. Beneath your gauntlet, the earth trembles with the march of thousands, knights in mail, archers with taut bows, crossbowmen blinking in the half-light. You tighten your grip on the pommel of your sword, feeling the familiar grooves worn by sweat and blood. There's no trumpeter's fanfare, no stirring speech from a king or pope, just the distant clatter of siege engines being dragged into position and the low murmur of prayer tangled with fear. You join the ranks at the base of the fortress wall, where ladders loom like skeletal fingers waiting to clutch at your hopes. The ram thuds against the gate with a hollow boom that rattles through your ribs. Every breath you draw is tinged with dust and anticipation. Then comes the signal, a single horn blast, and the world erupts. Arrows scream overhead, black wings blotting out the dawn, and you sprint forward, chain mail chafing your shoulders, sword raised. The ladder's rungs are slick with the sweat of previous climbers. Every step is a gamble between ascent and a fatal plunge. You feel hands scramble over your heels, the weight of men pushing behind you so immense you could disappear under the tide. Reaching the top, you heave yourself over the battlement, blade swinging in a wide arc. The first defender meets you with a spear. Metal bites into your shield, the impact reverberating down your arm. Instincts take over. You parry, thrust, and as the man staggers back, you glimpse his wide, terrified eyes. You hesitate for a heartbeat, thrown by the sudden proximity of mortality reflected in his face. Then duty roars louder than compassion, and you drive your sword home. The gasp that follows is muffled against stone, and already another soldier charges. The narrow ledge leaves no room to dodge. You hook his leg, send him tumbling backward into a screaming heap below. Inside the courtyard, chaos accelerates. Bodies roll in the dust, clashing steel rings hollowly. Horses skitter in tight circles, terrified, their blinders offering no comfort. You carve a path through clustered knights, friend and foe indistinguishable in the frenzy. The acrid tang of blood sticks to your tongue. Someone screams for water. Someone else implores God to spare their soul. Most just swing wildly, a last-ditch bid to stay alive. You parry an axe blow that would have cleaved your skull, then thrust upward into an armpit unprotected by mail, feeling the blade slide through flesh and sinew. Life flashes in mosaic fragments, torches guttering, stained banners, the hollowed gaze of dying men. The fortress's chapel looms ahead, its doors shattered. Priests have taken refuge inside, clutching crucifixes and chanting psalms in voices raw with terror. You step over the threshold, shaking off the dust of battle, and sense a shift. This is not merely conquest. It is sacrilege made flesh, the holy ground turned altar to slaughter. One priest locks eyes with you, mouth trembling as he whispers, "Mea culpa," but the words vanish as you lower your sword. The sun through the stained glass windows paints crimson patterns on the stone floor, as if the martyrs themselves are bleeding. By midday the inner gate falls, and the defenders begin to waver. Some surrender with hands raised, tears tracking through the grime on their cheeks. Others fight on until arrows pin them to walls like grotesque tapestries. You stand amid the wreckage, chest heaving, mind numb. A comrade thrusts a horn of wine into your hand. You gulp it down, wince as the sour liquid washes over your tongue, then hand it to a wounded archer limping nearby. He nods in appreciation, voice barely a rasp. To the living, you raise the horn to your lips again, but stop halfway as you notice the bodies stacked at the gate. John, the squire who taught you to sharpen your blade. Dietrich, whose laughter echoed through campfires. They lie in a pyramid of grief, still wearing helmets that will never shine again. The spoils are pitiful, casks of moldy grain, a handful of silver coins caked with dirt, a battered relic said to be a fragment of the true cross. You swallow your disappointment. This is war, after all, not fairy tale romance. Still, you pocket a copper ring found on a corpse, imagining its story, a loved one at home now left waiting, every prayer unanswered. Soldiers cart off chests of cloth while others set buildings aflame, smoke curling skyward like a signal of defiance. You wonder if this blaze will cleanse sin or simply add another layer of soot to history. As dusk settles, you stand atop the battlements again, surveying the blackened courtyard. Victory sighs in the wind, But it feels hollow, no trumpet blown for you today. Torches flicker, and you taste ash on your lips. The hush returns, heavier than before, as if the walls themselves mourn. Your legs tremble beneath you. You barely remember the man who rode into battle this morning, the one who believed in glory and godly cause. The armor that once felt like providence now seems like a tomb you carry. You stagger down the ladder, each rung a pinch of agony, and return to the makeshift camp beyond the walls. There, the surgeons work by lantern light, binding wounds with splintered boards and filthy rags. The cries of the dying mix with the clank of armor being scraped clean for tomorrow's march. You sit by the dying embers of a fire, pulling the copper ring from your pocket, turning it over in your palm. Maybe you'll send it home, a token of survival, or maybe you'll cast it into the dust, along with your faith and knightly honor. When you finally lie down on hard earth, every inch of you aches, old wounds flare, new ones throb, and your spirit shudders under the weight of memory. Above you, stars glint coldly, indifferent to your plight. You close your eyes, but sleep is a stranger in this land of ruin. Instead, you drift into a half-dream where armor is molten, swords bend like reeds, and you stand alone on a black plain, the copper ring burning your palm. In that dream, there is no sunrise, only endless night. Tomorrow, you'll rise again, don your steel like a curse, and follow orders into another fortress, another slaughter. But tonight, in the fragile pause between combat and collapse, you understand the truth. Victory in the Crusades is nothing more than a fleeting shadow, a promise written in blood that vanishes at dawn. And as you squeeze the ring until it cuts your skin, you realize that surviving this hell is not triumph, it's a sentence. The next dawn arrives under a bruised sky, swollen with promise and dread. You awaken beneath a blanket of half-dried blood and dust, your limbs stiff as wood planks. Each breath feels like inhaling shards of glass. Each heartbeat drums a warning that this crusade still has miles to go. You haul yourself upright, mail clinking in protest, and survey the camp, tents collapsed under the weight of sickness, horses gaunt as famine-riven specters, nights hollow-eyed and silent, as if sleep itself has abandoned them. A corpse lies half-covered by a threadbare cloak, one hand outstretched toward a lone loaf of moldy bread, frozen in some final act of desperation. You close your eyes for a moment, recalling the comfort of home, the warmth of hearth, the scent of freshly baked loaves, the soft murmur of voices in a safe hall. But that world feels like a dream you can no longer reach. You mount your horse, whose ribs scrape the coarse saddle blanket with every movement. The animal's breath steams in the chill morning air, a visible testament to its struggle. You pat its neck, the gesture more ritual than comfort. You need all the alliances you can muster, even with beasts. Behind you, the column falls into step, weary knights trudging through dew-soaked fields, pickets raising prayers to saints who seem deaf, pennants trailing limp ribbons that stir no breeze. The road ahead winds through barren hills where once orchards may have stood, now only stumps and blackened trunks mark the memory of green. Vultures wheel overhead, impatient for fresh fare. As midday's sun shards through scudding clouds, you glimpse the silhouette of Jerusalem etched against the horizon, slender minarets, domed roofs, walls scarred by centuries of siege. Your heart lurches, relief that the end of the road finally stands before you, dread at what you'll find on the other side. The closer you ride, the thicker the stench grows, burnt incense, rotting refuse, sweat, and fear. Pilgrims from distant lands drift through the gates, their eyes glazed with awe and terror. The city is a tapestry of tongues, turbans, and tears. Soldiers from both sides mingle in the streets, crusaders polishing bent blades, Saracens repairing battered bows. No one greets you kindly. No one offers water freely. Suspicion hangs heavy as cloth, and you realize that nothing about this place belongs to you. You join the assault on the city walls at the 9th hour, ladders creaking like the ribcage of some monstrous creature. Scorching oil rains down from above, black droplets hissing against wood and flesh. You leap from ladder to crenel, shield raised, scrambling over the rampart like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Below, defenders pour forth from towers, swords flashing, eyes wild. You crash into them with the force of desperation, steel meeting steel in a shower of sparks. The wall quakes, stones dislodge, and you tumble backward, hitting the ground with a breath-knocking thud. A hand snatches you up. A squire pulls you behind a shattered pillar, his face streaked with soot and sweat. He nods, wordlessly passing you a water skin. You drink until your throat burns, then take up your sword again, wincing as metal abrasions tear your gloves and bite into your palms. Inside the walls, the slaughter is swift and unrelenting. Narrow alleys funnel panicked refugees toward collapsed arches, where swords slash without discernment. Shops that once sold silks and spices now trade in ashes and screams. An old woman thrusts a bowl of stew at you, pleading with trembling hands. The broth is rancid, thick with congealed fat, yet you gulp it grateful for the warmth. Children cling to their mothers, wailing for mercy they will never receive. You catch sight of a group of knights dragging chains through the dust, captive nobles destined for ransom or worse. Their gaunt faces stare back at you with equal parts fury and despair, and you feel the weight of every drop of gore on your hands. As dusk bleeds into night, the city succumbs to a hush of exhaustion. Campfires flicker in courtyards strewn with debris. The scent of singed hair and broken masonry hangs in the air. You trap what little light remains with a lantern fashioned from battered metal and torn cloth, its glow trembling like your own resolve. You wander through the scattered dead, knights once roaring with bravado now silent, draped over fallen horses. Horses themselves collapsed in pools of their own suffering, civilians huddled in doorways, too broken to flee. You pause beside a shattered reliquary, its gilded frame twisted, saintly image scratched beyond recognition. You press a hand to the cold metal, wondering if the saints ever intended to be trophies in blood-soaked triumphs. That night, sleep eludes you. Instead, you sit by the walls, spine against rough stone, listening to distant prayers in languages you cannot follow, cries to Allah, to Christ, to any god who might grant this city a shred of mercy. The wind whispers through the broken slats of the towers, carrying the echo of distant drums, perhaps a warning or celebration, you cannot tell. You pull the copper ring from your pocket, worn thin at the edges, and twist it until it cuts into your palm. The pain is sharp and immediate, more real than the pangs of hunger or the ache of your muscles. You press it to your lips and taste iron. This ring is the only thing you've claimed from your journey that belongs to you, yet it binds you to every regret. As the first gray light of morning seeps through the cracks, you rise and feel the city stir again. The wounded moan, the living curse, the victorious exult, each voice competing to claim what little remains of hope. You sheath your sword, the blade nicked and discolored, and walk toward the gate. Outside, camels laden with stolen treasures trudge the road, their burdens glittering in the dawn. Merchants will mark up those coins 1,000-fold, pilgrims will pray at shrines and call it salvation, chroniclers will pen ballads of glory. But you know the truth, the land is hollowed, the people shattered, and the price of victory is etched in every hollow gaze, every shattered bone, every splintered heart. You mount your horse for the final time, shoulder heavy with armor and memory. Behind you, Jerusalem's walls shrink into the distance, but inside you, the weight grows. You ride through a valley where poppies bloom incongruously, blood-red flowers nodding in the breeze. You dismount and pick a single blossom, petals soft against your calloused fingers. It wilts almost instantly in your grasp, petals browning at the edges. You let it fall and step back into the saddle, each hoofbeat pressing you further from hope. Day after day, mile after mile, you will wear the stain of this crusade like a brand. Yet you will survive, because death here is less certain than despair. And so you turn eastward, toward a horizon that offers neither promise nor pity, only the long road home and the echoes of what you've done. The sun climbs high, its heat relentless as the memories that bake in your mind. You grip the reins with knuckles white and breathe in the dust, knowing that every grain carries a story of suffering. If you ever return to hearth and hall, no feast nor soft bed will ever wash the Crusader clean. The only thing that might still you is silence, and even that seems out of reach in a world still ringing with the clangor of swords and the cries of the broken. The road back is no kinder than the road in. Each mile churned by thousands of booted feet and wagon wheels carries the weight of grief and regret. You pass through fields that once promised grain now reduced to stubble and bone, villages where walls lie in rubble, and the air hums with the ghosts of those you left behind. The sun rides lower in the sky, its light slanting through battered treetops, casting long shadows that dance across your battered mail. Your horse plods on, hooves sinking into mud flecked with blood, as though the earth itself has absorbed every wound inflicted here. Nights are worst. Without the distant glow of Jerusalem's fires, darkness settles like a shroud, punctuated only by the faint hiss of wind through cracked tents and the restless panting of fevered men. Your own cough has worsened, each rasping exhale rattles through your ribs, and you count yourself lucky if the shivering fits leave you for more than an hour. You dream of home, a flicker of laughter, a table strewn with fresh bread and honey, the gentle creak of a rocking chair. Then you wake to the cold bite of dawn, limbs stiff with stiffness older than your youth, jaw clenched against the ache of missing voices. By the time you cross the river once more, this time heading west, the currents swirl with the detritus of defeat, broken shields, shredded pennants, even fragments of bone. You shoulder your sword and push on, heedless of the chill seeping through soaked gambeson. The local peasants who greet your passage offer nothing but hollow stares and bitter curses. They've learned that Crusaders bring death, not deliverance. Stray dogs follow the column, nosing at discarded rations and gnawing on the occasional corpse left unclaimed. You wonder if they know more mercy than men. Food grows scarcer. Supplies meant to sustain a mighty host dwindle to scraps of dried fish and crackers so old they snap under slight pressure. Some knights attempt to foray into orchards rumored to lie beyond the hills, only to find fruit rotted or guarded by watchful locals too wary to barter. You share a half-rotten apple with a comrade, biting around the bruised sections, forging a fleeting moment of camaraderie and a shared desperation. His name is Marcus. You met him in the spring, bright-eyed and eager, a squire determined to prove his valor. Now his face is gaunt, his spirit frayed, and each step drags him closer to collapse. You press a hand to his shoulder, whispering promises you know you can't keep. Soon we'll see the sea, soon we'll reach home. But the sea stays just beyond the horizon, a mocking silver ribbon disappearing into haze. Instead, winter slithers in early, trailing frost across tents and coating mud in a brittle shell. Fingers numb inside gauntlets, you break ice from water skins, each crack echoing in the hollow camp. Firewood is precious. You burn saddle straps and broken shafts, breathing in the acrid smoke as if it were a bomb. Around the flickering flames, men huddle wrapped in whatever hides they could steal from a fallen foe. The cold seeps through bones, turning breath to frost in the air and turning courage to question, why endure this hell? Disease prowls the camp like a silent predator. Sores fester where mail grated against skin, septic wounds more lethal than any arrow. You tend to your own injuries with the chaplain's meager supplies, a strip of cloth, a splash of wine as antiseptic, a whispered prayer. You pray for healing, but each day you feel your strength ebbing, as though the earth here drains life just to sustain its own. You watch as Marcus's cough becomes a rattle, hear the labored creak of his breath in the stillness before dawn. You hold him as he convulses, clutching his tunic in a death grip, and swear to the empty sky that you'll carry on, for him, for the men you've buried along the way, for the homeland you may never see again. Finally, one gray morning, the scouting party spots a distant landmark, the gleam of a salt marsh, the flat shimmer of the sea you've yearned to glimpse. The column stirs, a cautious hope flickering across hollow faces. You press forward, heart hammering in chest as ears straying for the roar of waves. When you crest the final hill, the ocean stretches before you, vast, indifferent, a mirror of your own exhaustion. Waves lap at the shore as if sighing in pity, and you dismount, boots crunching on sand stained dark by iron-rich mud. Some nights collapse, faces turn to the sky. tears mingling with salt spray. Others fall to their knees, kissing the ground as though it were sacred. You pause, sword in hand, and breathe in the brine, letting the taste anchor you to reality. There is no grand rescue fleet waiting, only a handful of creaky vessels hired by those who could afford passage home. You barter the last of your copper coins, once enough for a night's lodging, now your only hope for a berth on a rocking boat. You climb the gangplank, mail clinking in protest, and settle into the hull alongside haggard men whose sunken eyes shine with relief and dread. As the sails fill, the world you've known shrinks to a line on the horizon, and you feel the ship lurch beneath you, every joint protesting. The sea air chills you to the bone, but it carries a promise, distance from this crusade, at least. Days blur into nights at sea. Storms whip the vessel, waves batter the hull, and you taste salt on your parched lips. Scurvy stalks the crew, rations spoil in wet barrels. Yet even this ordeal seems trivial compared to the land you left. You recall the clamoring of war horns, the clash of steel entering bone, the cries of dying men, and you wonder whether any suffering here can compare. You close your eyes against the spray, imagining a hearth fire crackling, a warm bowl in your hands, a voice calling your name without fear. You exhale, knowing it may be a dream you'll chase for years. At last, the coastline of home appears, green hills rolling down to a sheltered harbor, spires of churches piercing the sky, smoke rising gently from chimneys. You step onto familiar soil, mail clanging as if mocking your gaunt form. Villagers gather, faces alight with curiosity and pity, offering bread and ale as if welcoming a returning hero. You swallow the ale, its warmth bright as hope, yet as you look into their eyes you see not awe but questions. What did you gain? What did you lose? You realize your answer is written in every scar and in every hollowed stare you cast skyward. You discard the copper ring onto a tavern table, its metal dulled by grit and regret, and leave it for a beggar to find. You step outside into the noon sun, warmth unfamiliar yet comforting, and take a deep breath of honest air. The chants of priests spill from a nearby church, promising mercy and forgiveness. You fold your arms, listening, feeling the weight of your armor shed like a second skin. You may carry the memory of the Crusades for the rest of your days, but here, at least, the battle is over. And though you survived what would break lesser souls, you wouldn't wish a single hour of it on your worst enemy, because some nightmares never let you wake up.